Everyone loves to see and hear birds, especially in the springtime. But did you know that cats can be a major threat to the birds? DG Blair is here from the Stewardship Centre, and she's going to talk about the opportunities that we have to make sure that that is not a problem.
I'm the Executive Director of the Stewardship Centre for British Columbia.
And what does the Stewardship Centre do?
So basically, the Stewardship Centre is a nonprofit organization that came out of a intergovernmental working group that was established in the 1990s, and then in 2006 transitioned to a nonprofit organization. And basically we focus on developing resources, programs for on-the-ground stewardship right across the province. So we basically try to create things that people can use across the province but maybe don't have all the resources to put together themselves. So we support stewardship organizations, individuals, conservation organizations, and local governments primarily around ecological stewardship.
So what makes you different from the other groups that we have in town? What do you do?
So we basically are sort of a more of the next level up in terms of creating resources that those folks can use. In other words, so if we have somebody up in Prince George who is doing stream keepers or watershed stewardship, that there's similarities across the board. And so we develop those resources, guides, etc. So we sort of fill that niche between on the ground and federal or provincial government. So we have three areas that we work in. One is around wildlife and species at risk. So we've developed a number of what we call stewardship practices guides. So these are, how do you do stewardship? What does it look like? And how can you govern your practices in terms of supporting stewardship? So wildlife and species at risk. Green shores is another aspect, so sustainable shorelines. And the third one is we call it supporting stewardship or building stewardship capacity. So basically looking at how can we build capacity amongst organizations, and we have some tools and resources for that.
So today you're going to be talking about birds, I understand.
Yep. So we call it our Cat and Bird project, and so basically it falls under our wildlife and species at risk program area. And so today we'll talk a little bit more about what we all can do to basically have healthy bird populations as well as have healthy pet cats.
And what's important about the Comox Valley in terms of birds?
Well, I think one of the things is that you have an awful lot of a real range of diversity of bird species. And of course you've got your wildlife management areas, so it's obviously been identified as an important area for conservation of bird species.
So I understand this is one of the major stops for the flight path for migrating birds?
That's correct. So that's why they call it an important bird area. And they also have a wildlife management area nearby.
And what's the problem with the cats?
So basically, what we have is, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't call it a problem. I always think of it as, it's an opportunity to basically have healthy pets as well as healthy bird populations. So what's happening right now is that we've got pet cats as well as feral cats, and so I'll just give a little bit of a definition of what a feral cat is. So a feral cat is a cat that is basically unowned, and it is on its own, and often they form colonies. So they basically try to survive on their own by just catching what they need to eat, versus a pet cat or a domestic cat, which may also roam, but is owned and fed by an owner. And so what the problem is, or the opportunity, is that we, both feral and roaming cats, basically, as we know, catch birds and other wildlife. Small mammals are also caught, so we've got a lot of native small mammals. But I think probably what speaks to most of our hearts is that we love to see the birds. And cats are they have a very deep instinct for predation, for catching wildlife and birds. And the statistics show that even a well-fed cat will still hunt just because of this deep instinctual, this deep instinct, I guess. And so what happens when we allow our cats out to roam, then they can catch birds. And the statistics also shows they don't actually even bring home. Some people say, oh, my cat doesn't hunt. Well, they only bring home 25% of what they've actually caught. And so there's a very, very big impact on bird populations. And the problem is that what we have is that cats are the number one human caused source of death of birds here in Canada. Nothing else compares to the impact of cats on bird populations, and bird populations are declining.
So if a person comes to you and says, well, that can't be true because my cat only goes out at night and I know the birds are sleeping.
Right. So depending on when the person lets that cat out and in, more than likely it's going to be dawn and dusk. And of course those are prime times when birds are on the ground foraging, feeding, and also nesting. And so cats actually have an impact on that as well. Mm-hmm.
So what can cat owners do to make sure that they protect both the cats and the birds?
Yeah. One is to think about that we want to have our pets to be as healthy as possible. And so when we allow our pets to go out and roam, then and that are unsupervised. I guess I should make sure that that's what we're talking about, unsupervised roaming. And when that happens, basically they can be hit by cars. They can get in fights with other cats or fights with dog, and we all know about vet bills from that. They can catch diseases that they cannot catch elsewhere. And needless to say, they can have an impact on our bird populations and other wildlife populations. So that's one of the things we do need to keep in mind, that cats who have indoors are either indoors or are supervised when outdoors actually lead longer, healthier lives. So we have to keep that in mind. So that's, I think, from a pet owner perspective, the number one. From the perspective of what we can do as pet owners to keep wildlife and bird populations healthy. One is habitat, and making sure that we have good backyard habitat for birds. And part of that is making sure that if we, for example, we have a bird feeder, we keep that feeder in a location that is not accessible to, let's say, your neighbor's cat coming by. Even if you are supervising your cat when outdoors, we don't want our neighbor's cat to come in, because birds that are, let's say, what they call ground foraging, or they'll eat the bird seed that's fallen off the feeder. We want to make sure that there's some trays that you can get so the feed does not fall down on the ground, so those ground eating birds are not vulnerable, because of course if you have a feeder, they're down there eating, the cat can come up and easily catch them. The other is the placement of the feeder. We want to make sure that it's placed in such a way that there aren't hiding places for cats to come by. So that's one thing in terms of our backyards. The other thing, I think, from both the bird perspective and the cat perspective is, one, keep your cat indoors if you want, and there's lots of things you can do to keep an active, happy cat. If indoors, you can create indoor play spaces. A friend of mine, she's got various level of shelves that are carpeted, and the cat goes all around, and it's great. Provide them opportunities to look outdoors, play with them, and so you can actually have a happy indoor cat. The other thing you can do is, if you want to have the cat to have access outdoors, is to you can create an outdoor catio. And so this is an enclosed space that again can incorporate natural features. They can see the birds, they can interact outside and get the fresh air, but you don't have to supervise them when they're outdoors. Finally, you can actually train your cat to go on a leash. So very similar to what we do with dogs. We don't see dogs out roaming at will. We basically have dogs under our control at all times when outdoors, for the most part. So we can train our cats to do the same. And I think that increasingly is going to be what we are going to be seeing, because cats actually can be very happy on a leash outdoors, and then they can be with you. So I think those are the main points. We also want to make sure that we neuter our cats, because cats are very prolific, and so it can come to a situation where we don't have too many cats, and what do we do with them, and then they don't have necessarily the care that needs to happen. And then finally, if you find yourself in a situation where you can no longer care for your cat, make sure you take it to the SPCA shelter so it can be cared for and rehomed. That's really important.
Now, I noticed your dog has a license and a leash. Do cats have licenses?
So depending on your neighborhood, it is becoming more of a norm. One of the things I know, the city of Calgary, for example, has had a very, very successful program through licensing. And basically, if your cat does happen to get out, then that cat can find its way home again. If there's no identification on your cat and it does happen to get out and roam, the likelihood of it finding its way back is quite a bit less as compared to a dog.
Now, SPCA does pick up stray dogs. Do they pick up stray cats?
You know, I'm not sure the answer here in this area. I know, for example, in certain municipalities, Dawson Creek in British Columbia, they have a licensing program, and part of that is to help return pets to their owners, and Calgary has a very, very good, they're probably the most progressive in terms of getting the cats to be returned home if they happen to get out.
Now, I heard of one owner who actually put in a tattoo or microchip to the ear, but then they didn't want it anymore, and so they took it to another community and let it go. So if you don't want your pet and you find you can't take care of it, what do you do with them?
So basically, as I'd mentioned, you need to take it to a shelter, the SPCA. They have really good facilities there. They can care for them until they rehome them.
So with the Stewardship Project, do you work with vets at all to say, can you neuter for free for one day a year or something?
That's a great point. Certainly we are working, we have veterinarians on our technical advisory committee, and we are working to try to get some information that can be offered at, we have a Happy Cat, the Happy Indoor Cat brochure, and to get that sort of information that's can be at the vet offices. So we're working with vets, and we're also working with the Canadian Wildlife Service from the bird end of things, and also the SPCA, the BC SPCA, to integrate the information about the impact of roaming cats from the wildlife perspective, along with the impact of how it's really not as good for your pet to be allowed to roam unsupervised from the SPCA. They're very much in favor of that as well, because they look at it from the animal welfare point of view.
And if they want more information, where do people go to find it?
Well, we've got a website, so if you go to stewardshipcenterbc.ca and then / cats and birds, it's also on our homepage. So we have all sorts of information for pet owners. We have information for municipalities that are interested in working more with us on this project. And then we have also resources to the National Nature Canada webpage, which has, again, more resources. So there's a lot of resources that are sort of up and coming. This is, I think, in terms of the knowledge about the impacts of roaming cats on bird populations in particular is fairly cutting edge. Like, I had a cat. I will be the first to say I did not know the impact of this, and now that I do know, I changed my practice. So, leash training, the way to go with a new kitten that I would get, and feel quite confident that we'd be able to be out there with the dog and the cat on their leash.
2 thumbs up. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Nature Canada started the Cats and Birds program years ago, and on a day like today, you can understand why. Cats and birds do need to live in harmony. Here is Louise Pedersen to tell you what they've been doing with Nature Canada and with kids. So tell me more about what does Nature Kids do?
Nature Kids BC is a nature exploration organization for kids aged 5 to 12 and their families. We have a network of family clubs all across BC, including one here in the Comox Valley. These clubs organize what we call Explorer Days. So these are like outdoor adventures that can be about anything from doing a stewardship event that involves removing invasive species to building boxes for bats, doing bird surveys, lots of cool things that usually take place out in nature.
And if families and kids are interested in keeping their cats safe as well as the birds, what can they do about it?
There's a whole range of things that people can do. Of course, we would advise that you do what is most effective, which is really to keep the two separate, keep birds separate from cats, restrict outdoor roaming. But there are other tactics that you can use, or other ways that you can kind of mitigate this problem. Outdoor enclosures have been proved to be, are really successful because you give the cat outdoor access and you can kind of see what's going on, but it doesn't create problems for our local bird population.
This is our catio that we are about to spend our second summer in. We didn't want the cats to get lost, get injured, run over by cars, attacked by raccoons. We have raccoons here. I was really concerned about their safety. And almost as important, in fact, maybe more important really, with the birds. I was tired of them killing birds. I'm very active in bird rehabilitation, songbird rehabilitation especially. And I just didn't think it was right that I was allowing my cats to be roaming and killing birds when they could, when I was supposed to be rehabilitating, supposed to be protecting songbirds, and it was really a no-brainer eventually. It is natural instinct for them to jump at things and run after birds because they fly. Anything you move past a cat, they will jump at. But that doesn't mean that you should be letting them kill the bird. You should be allowing them to do it, really. There are other ways you can keep them happy and entertained. They're always out here when we come out. And they have their cat stands here on the porch and also in the house. So they get to see, look out the window. They have scratch boards everywhere. The house is littered with catnip-filled toys. So they're pretty happy. You just have to spend a bit of time and just do the work. They end up being happier cats. They're calm. Our cats are calm. They're more friendly to people. They like people coming in. They used to run away when people would appear because they didn't know who they were. But now it's almost like, oh, this is exciting, a new face. And they're healthy. We don't have to worry about taking them to a vet because they have wounds or they're ill. We don't have to worry about how they're going to be home tonight. We all sleep better and we have more birds than ever. It's just much better.
There are also other tactics like putting a bib or colorful color on, which will alert the birds that there's a cat nearby. But that does not really solve the problem with baby birds and nestlings, which cannot flee if a cat is creeping up on them.
And what is the Nature Kids doing with the cat and bird program?
Yeah, so Nature Kids BC gets involved with a citizen science project every year. We've been doing that for at least the last 6 years, and it's really popular. Like, we find that our youth members are really excited to be able to contribute in such a tangible way to generating new knowledge. We had our youth members involved in testing different tactics for us. We had some that were testing the effectiveness of a colorful color, a bib, which it's really long and it prevents the cat from leaping. It definitely makes it much more visible, and also training that cat to walk on a leash wearing a harness. And we definitely saw some it's a reduction in the cats kind of bringing home birds. But I mean, as I said before, the best thing is really to try and keep the two absolutely separate, or to strictly supervise the cats when they're outdoors. We've been trying to kind of raise awareness that this is not just a matter of protecting the birds. It's also to kind of keep cats safe, because we know that when cats go outdoors and they're unsupervised, they roam, they are much more likely to catch some sort of disease, get injured through some sort of like fights with dogs, cats, or wildlife. So it's really to protect the cats as well. But definitely, like from the bird issue is also a very significant one. We know that around 5 to 7% of Canada's birds are killed by house cats every year, and a lot of birds that are killed are native species that are already sort of like experiencing a lot of pressures from habitat loss. There's food insecurity, and climate change is taking a big toll and providing a pressure on their population.
So when we have an area like this, which is very natural, but you also have houses and condos very close by, what danger does that pose?
Yeah, well, in any setting like this, where you've got a lot of houses, and you're such close access to the outdoors, and this is a really important bird area. Really the advice that we can give is to, for people to really consider like the sort of options that they have to keep both their cats safe and to keep the birds safe. We definitely have come to realize that whole color, that thinking that, cats deserve to be outside, it's very ingrained, even within our own nature kits. And so there is definitely a need for more public education that cats are an introduced species, not a native species, and they have a huge impact on birds. It seems like a lot of cat owners, if they do not see their cat bringing home dead birds or injured birds, they don't think that it's a real issue. But there's been lots of research studies done that actually show that most cats are involved in hunting birds. It's just a natural. It is like an instinct. They cannot help it, even if they don't kill it. They may try and play with it, and birds are just very susceptible to the scratches, which will undoubtedly lead to infections and death. So yeah, it is really important that we try and protect the cats and the birds by keeping the cats inside if possible.
If people are interested, where can they go for information?
They can go to our website, which is naturekidsbc.ca. Nature Canada also has a wonderful website that is dedicated to the Cats and Bird project, which is catsandbirds.ca, which provides a lot of resources for what people can do, and there are opportunities to kind of to take action on that particular webpage.
From the Comox Valley, this is Judi Murakami for Shaw TV.